Joining me live now is Peter Matthews, Professor of Political Science at Cyprus College. Thank you very much for joining us. How do you think this is going to play out in regards to reaching a deal?
Well, they need to reach a deal, but I don't think they should hold the border policy as a hostage to aid the foreign policies that we need to accomplish, which they're doing right now, holding it back in terms of foreign aid and things that we have to do with other countries in Europe and Ukraine and Russia. This border policy should be separate. And President Biden is willing to compromise, and he's actually gotten a bit tougher already since the last few months. So I think the Republicans should take that as a clue and then go for it and try to get this thing resolved so we don't compromise our foreign policy.
Professor Matthews, we've just had some breaking news. Israel has admitted to mistakenly have killed 3 hostages during combat in Gaza. Very sad news indeed. How do you think it's going to affect negotiations?
Well, first of all, it's a total tragedy that's happened. The hostages themselves getting killed by Israeli forces. And then, of course, what happened October 7th was a terrible tragedy. But we have to look at the reasons for negotiation, Janie. This is a horrendous case where 18 to 20,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed already by the Israeli actions in the bombing of trying to kill Hamas. Israel's killed almost 20,000 Palestinian civilians. And at the same time, we had 1,200 Israeli people killed on October 7th, and hostages taken, 200 hostages or more, of which 130 are still there. So this is a terrible tragedy on both sides. To solve this, we have to have negotiations which puts the center and front a two-state solution. In other words, withdrawing the 1967 borders for Israel out of the occupied territories, but a guarantee of Israel having its own country and its own secure borders with Jerusalem as a capital, but also Jerusalem should be a capital, part of it, East Jerusalem, for the Palestinian state. And there must be a Palestinian state independent and totally secure as well, with economic aid equal, so that both sides can develop their economies and trade and prosper. This has to be done, especially for the people there, but also for the whole world, because it's going to erupt into a terrible world conflagration out of other countries getting involved.
Well, let's turn to another topic. And the US Congress has voted to commence an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. His son Hunter has said that there really is no evidence that his father was involved in those business dealings. What's your take on this?
Well, so far there is no direct evidence that his father was involved. There's implications that the Republican-led investigation is trying to make that just because Joe Biden's son Hunter paid Joe Biden back for a loan on a truck that he bought, because don't forget Hunter was having all these problems of chemical dependency, drug addiction, et cetera. And so he was living a terrible life and he couldn't even get credit. So his dad lent him some money to buy a pickup truck. It's those kinds of things they're saying, well, the money came from his business account, et cetera. They're trying to find something to connect the president with his son's misdealings. And that's not really a good thing to do. If they're going to have concrete evidence for impeachment, then they should be done in the procedural way as the rule of law. I think that's what has to be done and insisted upon. And we hope they won't overstep their bounds and make insinuations about President Biden, although we need to have inquiries to find out what's going on. At this point, there's no evidence to have any kind of an impeachment investigation, but they're probably going to go forward with the inquiry at least.
Yeah, how are the polls looking?
Polls are looking a little bit dismal for President Biden. He's most recent polling I saw was he's between 5 and 10 points behind President Trump in the several swing states, 5 to 7 swing states that he absolutely needs to win. And he won those states last time, but now he's actually behind President Trump. Like I said, in some states like Georgia, behind 5 points, Trump, and he's also behind 10 points in Michigan. And that has also to do with his foreign policy position, how he stood, in the case of the conflagration in Israel and Hamas and Gaza. So that's taken support from him as well, as also the economy. For many people, they don't see it benefiting themselves directly, even though the macro numbers are good. Inflation is only 3%, but then again, people are still looking at the high prices that have not gone all the way away from us. The high prices the rate of increase of inflation went down, but the inflation itself wasn't wiped out. So people are paying more for now for their groceries and their rent and things than they did, say, 3 years ago before COVID. So that's why his numbers are pretty weak now in terms of he needs to really build those up and get back his support of his coalition. Young people, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, and others, middle-class folks, working, blue-collar workers. He's got to bring them back to his side right now with policy he has to bring in. He doesn't have a lot of time to do it either. It's only 1 year away from the general election.
And if Donald Trump was to be president, what would that mean for Ukraine?
oh, if President Trump becomes president, it's going to be Ukraine can just say, well, we've got to take whatever is offered to us because Trump is going to probably take the Russian position in terms of not really wanting to support Ukraine to make sure it has its independence. And that would be tragic. I mean, you have to have a settlement there. You have to have a negotiated settlement, but Ukraine should be guaranteed sovereignty. At the same time, we should make sure that the Russian demand about NATO, that's something that has to be negotiated as well. But Ukraine just entered the European Union, so that's good, European community, and that's the beginning. And I do believe that if President Trump comes into office, it's going to change things quite a bit. And we have to be concerned about what kind of strategic difference there will be now at that point. But I do believe we have to negotiate and get security for Ukraine, even if it's bilateral security arrangement with the United States. Without joining NATO, the U.S. should guarantee Ukraine's security and then negotiate with Russia on returning those occupied territories on the east, as well as negotiate other things that have to be done. Otherwise, this can also go into conflagration that can erupt into a world situation, which would be very dangerous for all of us.
Professor Peter Matthews, always great to see you. Appreciate your time and expertise. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Talk to you later.